is going to take us in the world of document sharing and FHIR, and an IHE profile called MHDS, if I read the title well. Here it is. John, the floor is yours.
All right, so I hope I'm coming through okay.
Perfect.
Excellent. So good morning. So what I'm going to be covering is, the evolution, I guess, of the IT Infrastructure Committee to follow along with what Charles just kind of illuminated with DICOM continues to evolve. So I'm going to be covering the ITI's Mobile Health Document Sharing, MHDS, which doesn't indeed use MHD, but it's really more of, well, how can I, if I'm starting from greenfields, I don't have XDS already in play, I don't have an XCA environment, I'm just, wanting to set up document sharing using fully a FHIR platform. So that's kind of the focus of this presentation. And like many of the things from the IT Infrastructure Committee, it's very modular and actually leverages quite nicely the modularity that comes in. So I am John Moehrke. I am a co-chair within the IT Infrastructure Committee. Been engaged with IHE and HL7, ISO, blah, 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 for now 22-ish years. Brought into this by Charles, so I either thank Charles or not on that particular front. So this is kind of the holistic, what am I going to be telling you about? So within IT infrastructure, we have XDS, we have XCA, XDR. We have all of those infrastructures for sharing documents. It's important that they are content agnostic. They can support CDA documents. Heard this morning on another couple of presentations about the FHIR document, the IPS, and others will be coming as well. The XDS, and in this case MHDS, they're all content agnostic. They're there primarily as a way of gaining access to, discovering. So the metadata is used to discover these documents, retrieve of the documents, publishing of the documents. So it's content agnostic, but it's content enabling. The MHDS adds to the MHD environment a persistence layer and lifecycle management like XDS provides. So we took a look at XDS and said, well, we need these same kinds of functionalities when it comes to persistence and lifecycle management. So, based on that, we have a centralized registry, the MHDS document registry. You can have distributed document storage like in XDS, or you can use that centralized registry as the document storage. It's up to the deployment choice. We have included, in this case, patient identity management. With XDS environment, you have to say, okay, this is XDS with PIXM or PIX or PDQ or the like. With MHDS, we were asked to bring everything together. So right here, you're seeing this patient identity management, organization management, authorization management, bring in the audit log management and the like. So we bring all of these things together into MHDS. It's really a profile of profiles, if you will. Indeed, it really doesn't have any volume 2 material, because all of the volume 2 material comes by way of these grouped profiles. There are some support publications, and these are the exact same support publications that you have for XDS, I put them up there because, you know, I'm not really going to be going into what is document sharing. I'm not really going to be going into what are documents, why do I want to publish documents, those kinds of things. I'm really focusing on MHDS as a solution. But these support publications are critical to understand the metadata, to understand the concepts, to understand choosing of the value sets within your affinity domain, coming up with the policies for who can ask for what, who can receive what is the responsibilities when you receive data. Those kinds of things are all parts of these additional support publications. All right, so now we get to MHDS, and this is the fundamental, you know, highest of level diagrams. It's, you know, for actors, if you will, but you'll see in a little bit, they're not exactly actors, but they are an abstraction into this concept. So on the left, you have systems that want to publish documents, that need to publish documents. That's essentially, you know, what the left-hand side is. On the far right-hand side is systems that want to consume documents. So they want to be able to query for documents and consume documents. And then in the middle, we have, you know, kind of, you know, some glue stuff. First off is on the top, the yellow, the Health Information Exchange central infrastructure. These are the things that are not the document registry, and then you've got the MHDS document registry. So the only actor that's formally defined within MHDS is the MHDS document registry. All of the other stuff we benefit by orchestrating into the MHDS environment. So I'm now going to move to a couple of eye charts. I don't expect that you are able to fully understand this, but the idea here is, again, these are the same diagrams. We've kind of moved the consuming system over to the left just because it was easier on this particular level of detail. But essentially on the left-hand side now, you've got the systems that want to publish documents, you get the systems that want to consume documents. And you'll notice there that these systems are comprised of other client-side IHE implementation guides profiles. So the MHD document source, the IUA authorization client, the PDQM or PIXM consumer, sharing of value sets and concept maps, terminology consumer, MCSD is the directory system, and it's the consumer actor, ATNA, and consistent time, like we always bring in here. And you can see kind of in a real shorthand the transactions that those are dealing with. And we do go into a little bit more detail within the MHDS, but effectively we're just using these transactions for a given purpose to orchestrate into this holistic system. Systems that consume documents, similar group, except it's the document consumer actor instead of the document source actor. The HIE central infrastructure, we kind of say, okay, you're in green fields, you need patient identity management, you need value sets, you need a directory, time client, ATNA, repository. So these are the server side of those particular implementation guides, and you would put those somewhere in the middle as well. It is possible that they are all implemented on exactly one FHIR server, and it's a off-the-shelf FHIR server. So that's one of the beauties, is this whole right-hand side is really could be as low end as one FHIR server. Now, ultimately, as things grow, you want to move some of these things out for various management purposes. Maybe it's administrative reasons why you want the terminologies on the different systems, or you want the directory on a different system. So they can be on different systems, but they can be on one system as well. And then on the far right is really the thing that's being created in the MHDS document registry. It is a document recipient, MHD document recipient, MHD document responder. Obviously, in order to be able to talk about you know, the MHD stuff to the systems that are publishing and the systems that are consuming. And it's also, you know, the thing that is enforcing the IUA authorization tokens. So it has to have that capability as well. It then also, if you'll notice here on the bottom side of the registry, those are actually it as a consumer. So we do expect that it is a consumer of the patient management. We think it is going to be a consumer of terminology, especially when it comes to enforcing of, you know, that the class codes have to be from this particular value set. So it can use the same terminology system as well, and the like. So you see, it is a server on the upper side, but it is of course needing to do some logic, and therefore it can be a client as well. And then of course, you know, it is also the secure, you know, has to be able to secure things. So now we get to another eye chart, and I really don't expect you to look at this because ultimately I'm going to be zeroing in over the next set of slides on the various sections of this. But if you get a visualization, the left-hand column is, you know, a document consumer actor from MHD. The middle one is the registry and central infrastructure. And on the right-hand side, I'll clue you in on that one a little bit later. But essentially what you're seeing is each of these big boxes is the reuse of another implementation guide, like Aetna, or like MHD, or like the patient management. So we're going to zero in over the next slides. Don't worry too much about this high level view. So first we zoom in at the top. You know, as I was indicating with the ancillary papers that speak to value set management and security management and certificate issuance and those kinds of things, there is absolutely, you know, a need to set up your affinity domain, to come up with your policies, to get certificates issued. Those kinds of things are really just, you know, bread and butter of any kind of trust infrastructure. We then, the first box is showing reuse of IUA. So in this context, IUA, you're going to look for the metadata endpoint. You're going to request an authorization. You're going to get back a token granted or denied. This is happy path. And essentially from that point forward, that token is reused across all of these transactions. And that's why the green vertical starts to show up. So that's showing just reuse of that token. Next up, we create a secure communications channel, which we're going to reuse as well. In this case, it's TLS, HTTPS, pretty off the shelf from web services perspective. Noting here that within the IUA implementation guide is a new option on the Aetna that says I'm going to use normal server-side TLS where I use the OAuth for the client authentication. So there is a new secure communications option that you would tend to use with IUA. You can certainly use mutually authenticated TLS, but you can also just use the OAuth for the client side, and there's an option in IUA. We then, of course, you know, I have to show audit logging. So reuse of the audit logging transaction. So anytime we have a security or privacy relevant event, we're going to record that. And in here, we're recording it to the central infrastructure. I'm not making a distinction on the left-hand side between the MHD registry and all of the other FHIR services, which are that HIE central infrastructure. In this case, I've simplified it down to, yep, there's just one server. It's doing all of these. That's just for simplicity's sake. So next up is patient identity. A patient presents, you need to be able to find their identity. For that, we, of course, reuse the PICS-M or PDQ-M implementation guides. PDQ-M is when you want to look up by some of the demographics parameters. PICS-M is when you have an identifier and you just want to convert that identifier into the health information exchange's identifier. Different use cases, how much do you want to expose? Some policies may choose PICS-M environment only. Some policies may choose PDQ-M. In this case, we're just talking about doing the query for finding of the patient identity within that health information exchange. The next box below that, sections or numbers 10 and 11, are focusing on, hey, we noticed that the patient has indicated they've updated their last name. So, okay, well, under the FHIR, which is brought into MHDS, we are managing in the central infrastructure a golden patient resource. So in this case, we update the golden patient resource within that central infrastructure. And that's what FHIR is all about, is saying for those environments, especially the green fields, let's just manage a golden patient identity within the infrastructure. You can put local identities as cross-references, so you still can use it in a cross-reference, but it's more managing a golden one that people, that all of the actors are intended to be using. So now we move into document retrieval. MHD ITI 67. It's just use of MHD. In this case, it's doing a query for medical summary. We're looking for the class code of this link value. We're probably going to get back maybe an on-demand, or we might get back a entry. So we get back some results. We look at the results to pick which one best fits our needs. Probably the one that's the newest, right? Or the on-demand version. So we then do an ITI 68 to get that data, and I now have the document. So again, this is just reuse of the MHD document consumer to the document responder transaction, implemented with the responder really being that MHDS document registry. There is an alternative flow, and this was that reason for that third column on the right. And this is not necessarily required within MHDS, but anytime I'm talking to people about FHIR infrastructure, they usually will start to say, hey, great, that you have this way to retrieve documents. Consuming documents is so difficult. Can't you give me a better way? And we have within ITI this MXDE implementation guide and this QEDM implementation guide, which set up this environment such that, well, if I have documents, but I have consumers that would really prefer to retrieve, things like observations and allergy intolerances and conditions, well, maybe I can have a system that decomposes the documents into FHIR resources. And when those FHIR resources are made available, there is provenance back to the document from whence they came. And that's what this set of boxes 18 through 26 is talking about. So first up, is this question of when do we kick off this decomposition? And there's a bunch of possibilities about when one might kick off the decomposition. It might be on the first QEDM query, but it might be when documents are originally published. Those are two ends of the spectrum. One is you decompose them early, where maybe no one ever wants to QEDM the content. On the other hand, QEDM query, you've now got potentially time investment to do all of this looping while the QEDM query is outstanding. So you've got those issues, but you might trigger based on a patient lookup back there at the PICSM or PDQM. You might just simply do it as a nightly batch or what have you. But at some point there is number 18, some trigger out to this system that's going to decompose documents. It's going to do a normal ITI 67 to look for data. It's going to get its results. It's going to then spin through all of the results that it gets, retrieving the documents, decomposing them into FHIR resources. When a FHIR resource is new, it records that. When that FHIR resource has already been decomposed out of a previous document, I just record, an additional provenance indicator to that instance. But essentially, there is some expectation that you can deduplicate data. You might want to be rather conservative about the deduplication, but nonetheless, that's a policy choice. And then ultimately, for every document that you decompose, you record a provenance. That provenance can be used to navigate from a medication to where was this medication published. Okay, this medication has been published year over year over year in many discharge summaries and medical summaries. Okay, so it can be pretty confident of that versus this other piece of information was only recorded once and it was disputed elsewhere. So you have this provenance link. Ultimately, you then have the QEDM, another implementation guide. This one is seen more as coming from the PCC committee than ITI, but essentially we jointly worked on that. And essentially it's just a very simple query of some subset of the resources, and it explains how to understand the provenance to get back to the document. QEDM, just as a modern sidebar, there is efforts going on within HL7 related to the IPS called IPA, so the International Patient Access. International Patient Access covers the same space as QEDM covers. It's being covered, more modern. It's being covered as a joint effort. So what will probably happen within IHE is the QEDM will either become a veneer on IPA, or it will, kind of be an alias. So we don't know exactly, but effectively, if you hear IPA and QEDM, they're covering the exact same space. They're predominantly indicating a subset of resources and a subset of query parameters without really profiling the content. So we now have the data. We can imagine we're treating the patient and we're needing to either look up codes or we're going to create a new document. So we need to find a value within a value set, maybe do some concept map. So SVCM is there to support that. Provider directory, we're going to look up oncologists within a particular region. The MCSD supports those kinds of searches. So again, we just reuse what we have available. And then publish the document. So now we've switched into a publishing mode. We're going to publish the document to that central infrastructure. It's going to get persisted in 38 by the MHDS registry, returning success. And we just kind of move along here and rinse and repeat. So that's kind of what this bottom is. But you'll notice, there's various document types that we have implementation guides for and are seen as just as legitimate in an MHDS environment as would be in an XDS environment, and the like. Obviously, if you're using an IPA document, that decomposition that I talked about up here, that decomposition, if it's an IPS document, is rather straightforward. Okay, so this is the summarization, where MHDS is based on the concepts learned from XDS. It uses the exact same metadata model. It has a very much a persistence model like XDS has, but it brings in these other things because they're there and they're modular, and it's easier to explain them to support things like organizational directory, patient management, security, privacy. There actually is a consent discussion in there. It just doesn't graphically show here, and the like. So the MHDS is on our profiles.IHE.net in the ITI Infrastructure Committee as MHDS. So if there's any questions, or if I have any time to take questions, because I think I went over a bit.
Yeah, you got a little bit of time. You are probably overwhelmed by acronyms. Remember that John has, many years of experience and of understanding of XDS and of FHIR and all of those things. You may not have realized, but what you've seen here is a wealth of understanding integration and how to combine resource access with document access with the benefits of each strategy, and resolve, in a box, how to create a national or regional sharing infrastructure, all scripted, ready to be done. It's actually done downstairs. MHDS is tested this year for the first time. John, that's going to be one question. Can you comment on the testing which is done and how things are progressing?
So the testing is certainly happening on MHD. I don't know whether there's any testing going on with MHDS. Now, obviously, if it's completely modular, all of the testing on PDQ, MPIXM, MHD, is testing towards MHDS. But I really don't have any deeper details than that.
Any direct view. Okay, so we'll ask that question during the VIP tour going downstairs. A question in the back.
I've got a question to maybe put some more acronyms in. So you said that this was based on XDS experience, which is like cross-enterprise, right? What about cross-community? Are there any plans to extend this to cross-community access, or just to use the same profiles? What the strategy will be?
Yeah, so we have not been necessarily asked for how does an MHDS community live within an XCA community. That's one possibility. And for the most part, it should be rather academic for, well, okay, it's a community. So that's one possibility. So you federate through with XCA. That I think is the most logical expansion, because the federation of communities really benefits from a lot of the functionalities within XCA. But we don't even have within MHDS that minor linkage between XCA and MHDS, but that's really should be simple. There is some proposals for doing a XCA kind of thing, but using FHIR. And that I think is a little bit further out, because I think we need to understand more how one supports multi-hop federation using REST, because REST is predominantly not intended to be used that way. So one of these questions might be, well, gee, when we do start to see federations that want to use only FHIR, how do we do that? But no, there really isn't anything else there. It's just really the first one is the closest, using XCA as the federation model, which has the advantage that any consuming actor within any XCA environment has ready access to MHDS. You don't have to have different consuming actors.
Thank you. So I think I'm going to take the question in order. You third, and those are going to be the last three.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, John. It's really inspiring. Maybe I missed your information about the registry. I learned that the repository could be a FHIR server.
Mm-hmm.
How do you intend to implement the registry?
So the registry is using the normal FHIR document reference and list resource. So yes, the whole central infrastructure could be one FHIR server.
And does it scale? Does it scale?
Well,
build it and you'll tell us.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
I do expect that there will be administrative reasons why you would want to separate out various roles into individual administrative domains. But from a pure performance perspective, just throw some more cloud at it, right? I think the bigger one is administrative. For example, I think so right now I'm showing in the MHDS that very same diagram, but with your terminologies, those who manage your terminologies are probably a different set of people under different rules and maybe have some different performance characteristics. So I think I can see breaking these out for administrative reasons more than I can see that performance is going to be the reason why you break them out. But obviously, performance as you scale is a problem.
Thank you. One question before the end. Be brief.
Yeah, John, would you agree that MHDS is actually a very nice example which shows how IHE can make all the nice and really important things which are produced on the FHIR side regarding FHIR resources, implementation guides, practically implementable in the real world, because it adds all the additional things which are necessary to really get it working.
Well, of course.
A lot of glue there, John.
Well, of course. Yeah, and one of the things that often gets missed, and you said it there, is that IHE is writing FHIR-based implementation guides, and yes, MHDS I think is an exceptional example, because effectively it's not just a big implementation guide, but it's a big implementation guide showing the modularity of other implementation guides being pulled in and further refined and used in a workflow. So absolutely.
Thank you. Last question.
Last but not least, simple question: how many of the MHDS-based infrastructures has been already deployed?
I don't know. I would love to know
So
that.
John, MHDS has been published when? Late last year?
Um,
Time flies.
so it was updated this year, but the original public comment was, yeah, January of 22.
Okay, so you see it's hot from the press. Now, when you open the lid, there's a lot of other the pieces that people have had for a fairly long time. But MHDS in itself is just coming out. And it was actually, probably not enough time to present. And it's going to be a fair amount of work to test, because view the number of transactions, the number of actors, and the level of integration. We're testing an entire health information exchange, an infrastructure for a region or a country. So, it's not, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So next year, we'll be discussing this. Speak to your favorite infrastructure vendors and ask them how they're going to, and they plan on bringing all of those pieces and MHDS to reality. This is, 20 years of analysis of understanding, and remind people one thing: document sharing is a clinical need, not a technology need. So stop thinking document equal PDF. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Document sharing is here to stay. It is the paradigm that can scale up to, amount of records and amount of patient to any size you want. And it has a lot of nice characteristics that John has summarized at the beginning that make it a unique approach. Separation of content and of access is fundamental in healthcare, because the content is a mess. You'll never finish the content. You'll never stop evolving the content. So if you start mixing content and transaction, this is a recipe for a lot of trouble in deployment. Thank you, John.
Yeah, I guess one other point I want to throw in there, Charles, is
yes, go ahead.
MHDS is intended for greenfields. So if you don't have XDS already, or you don't have XCA, then MHDS. But if you have XDS or XCA, then just use MHD as the API to those environments. So really, this was intended for greenfields, and it's really expected to be implemented mostly in the developing worlds.
Yeah, I think that, many of the XDS deployment today have a FHIR MHD interface. The French one is coming up. Italy, Venezuela region has had one for 5 years, 4 or 5 years. It's working, used on all bunch of mobile apps and all of that stuff. So XDS with a FHIR front end is also a nice normal evolution of things. Thank you very much. We have very little time left.